All right, our next lesson, and this is our last lesson in this statistics unit, is on measures of variability. In your table of contents, you need to write the title of the lesson, measures of variability, and then on the next clean sheet of notebook paper in your spiral notebook at the top, you need to write the title, measures of variability, and then our EQ for today, how can I use measures of variability to make predictions about a population? Hit pause and set up your table of contents in your notes. When you're ready to move on, hit play. All right, measures of variability. In our last lesson, we learned about measures of center, which include the mean and the median. Today, we're going to learn about measures of variability, where we're looking at the biggest and the smallest numbers and kind of the spread of a set of data. So the first definition you need is range. Copy this definition into your notes, and then we're going to look at the example below. You just need to copy the definition for now. We'll do some examples together of range. So you're copying this definition of range. The range of a data set is the difference between the greatest and the least values. Out beside that, I want you to write this little formula, that range equals the biggest number minus the smallest number. That's how we find the range. You may even want to put a box around that. That's your formula for range. Biggest number minus smallest number. Okay? If you're looking at the data set below, we see the biggest number, we see the smallest number. To get the range, we just subtract them. In this case, they had a negative number for the smallest number, so we did minus a negative, which is actually adding. But usually you're going to just be subtracting those. All right, next, you need to understand something called quartiles. Copy this definition for quartiles into your notes. How can I find the quartiles of a set of data? So quartiles are going to divide the data set into 4 parts with the same number of data values in each part. And to find the quartiles, you need to remember our process that we use to find the median first, because before we can find the quartiles, we have to find the median. Remember, we need to put our numbers in order from least to greatest. So they've done that for us in this example here. To find the median, remember we start on the outside and we kind of cross numbers out from the outside, working our way to the middle to find the median. So for this example, I would cross out -5 and 11, -1 and 8, 4 and 8. So I would get 7 as my median. 7, which is the median, acts as kind of a wall in the middle of our data set. It is a division between the lower half of the data, which is down here, and then the upper half of the data, which is up here. Okay? So then, to find the first quartile, what you're going to do is find the median of the lower half of the data. So looking at the lower half of the data here, I would cross out this number and this number, and I have this number in the middle. So it's like the median of the lower half of the data. We call that the first quartile, or sometimes you'll just see it called Q1 for first quartile. To find the third quartile, or sometimes we call it Q3, it's just the median of the upper half of the data. So I would cross out these two numbers, and I would have this number in the middle. This is Q3, or the third quartile. Okay? Last thing, interquartile range. How can I find the interquartile range? Sometimes we abbreviate that as IQR. It is the difference between the first and the third quartiles. So let's underline the difference between the first and the third quartiles of the data set. And I want you to write this little formula out next to the definition after you write down the definition. IQR, which is the interquartile range, equals Q3 minus Q1. Q3 stands for the third quartile. Q1 stands for the first quartile. Again, we find the third quartile and the first quartile by first finding the median, and then we do the median of the lower half, that's the first quartile. The median of the upper half is the third quartile. To get the interquartile range, you subtract the third quartile minus the first quartile. So here, 8 minus -1. We're going to try an example of this in a second. So copy the definition down and also make sure you have this little formula, and then we're going to be ready to try an example. Okay, do this with me in your notes. Call this example 1. Okay, the first thing we need to do is put this data set in order from least to greatest. I want you to write the data set down in order from least to greatest in your notebook. When I'm checking your notes, I'm going to be looking to see that you did this. So in order from least to greatest, the first number I see is 35, that's the least. Next, 80. Next, 100. And you see how I'm crossing them out so I don't repeat one by accident. 110, 120, 120, 170, and 180. Alright, so I've got my data set in order from least to greatest. You should have that set of numbers written down. Next, the first thing I have to find is the median. Remember to find the median, I'm just going to start on the outside of the data set and cross out the pairs of numbers until I get to the middle. Cross, cross. When I get 2 numbers, we learned this in our last set, or our last set of notes. When I get 2 numbers in the middle, remember I have to add those together and divide by 2 to find the median. So the median, I'm going to add these together, 110 and 120 is 230, and then I'm going to divide that by 2 to get the median. 230 divided by 2 gives me 115. So the median, I want you to make this list of things over here and write it down. For the median, it's 115. Now, when I have 2 numbers in the middle and I'm finding the median by adding those 2 numbers and dividing by 2, this number and this number really aren't the median. It's between those 2 numbers is the median. So when I work to find my Q1 and my Q3, I'm just going to draw a line between those 2 numbers to separate the upper and the lower half of the data. So to find Q1, I'm going to find the median of this lower half of the data. So I'm going to be crossing out 35 and 110. And then here, I get 2 numbers in the middle. So just like what I did with the median, when I get 2 numbers in the middle, I add them and divide by 2. So that would be 80 plus 100 is 180. Divided by 2 is 90. So Q1, my first quartile, is 90. Now I have to do the same thing for Q3. I'm going to look at the upper half of my data. I'm going to cross out 120 and 180. Then I have 2 numbers in the middle, so I'm going to add those and divide by 2 to find what Q3 is. So 120 and 170, when I add them together, is 290. 290 divided by 2 is 145. So Q3 is 145. Again, remember Q1 is like finding the median of the lower half of the data. Q3 is like finding the median of the upper half of the data. IQR, remember we wrote down the formula that IQR equals Q3 minus Q1. So now that I found Q3 is 145, Q1 is 90, I just subtract those to get the interquartile range, and that's going to be 55. 55. Last thing to find is the range. Remember the formula I wrote down for range is going to be the biggest number, which is 180, minus the smallest number, which is 35. So the range, I'm subtracting biggest minus smallest, 180 minus 35. Just punch that in your calculator. 180 minus 35 is 145. And we're done. So these different numbers that we found, these are called measures of variability, looking at how the numbers are spread out in a data set. Median, Q1 and Q3, the first quartile and third quartile, the interquartile range we got by subtracting these, and then the range is the biggest minus the smallest. Let's try one more example and then we're going to move on. If you feel ready to do this on your own, I want you to hit pause and do this one just like we did example 1. If you're not ready to do it on your own, do it with me now. Alright, first thing we need to do, just like last time, is write these numbers in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to start 3, 5, 8, what's next, 10, 16, 17, 20, ooh, I missed 14, oops, 14, 16, 17, my bad, 20, 21, 21 again. Okay, and I usually count and make sure that the number of numbers is the same. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm good. All right, first the median, working my way from the outside to find the middle number, crossing out 3 and 21, 5 and 21, 8 and 20, 10 and 17. I'm getting two numbers in the middle, so I add those and divide by 2. 14 plus 16 is 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. This is my median. Okay? So that is 15. I added them and divided by 2 because I got two numbers in the middle. Alright, now remember that this, between those two numbers, acts as my division for my upper half and my lower half of the data. To find Q1, I find the median of the lower half of the data, so I'm going to cross out 3 and 14, 5 and 10, and I get one number in the middle. This is Q1, 8. To find Q3, I'm going to cross out 16 and 21, 17 and 21. I get 20. This is my Q3. 20. How do I find the IQR? Remember, IQR is Q3 minus Q1. That's going to be 20 minus 8, which is 12. Last, the range is the biggest minus the smallest. The biggest is 21. The smallest is 3. 21 minus 3 is 18. It's my range. All right, these are our measures of variability. Now that we know those measures of variability, we're going to learn how to represent them in something called a box plot. So I'm going to switch to a second quick little video so we can look at box plot.